Israel is warning of retaliation after Iran fired a wave of missiles for the first time since the April ceasefire.
The Revolutionary Guard said the attack will not be one-off, but the start of a full week of continuous strikes.
Sirens sounded over Israel as missiles glided in the night sky. Iraq and Syria have shut their airspace amid fears of further violence.
President Trump is urging Israel not to retaliate. He's called on Iran to stop its attacks and return to the negotiating table, saying an agreement is, quote, very close to being signed this week. And for more on the latest hostilities in the war, let's speak now with Nadia Hashemi, Associate Professor of Middle East and Islamic Politics at Georgetown University. Professor, good to see you again. I want to start by asking you about those reports from Axios and Israeli media reporting that President Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu spoke on the phone. I'm wondering which you see as the more likely scenario, Trump telling Bibi, stop that, or is it more likely he told him, okay, you can go ahead because of the latest attacks from Iran? And also what, Bibi's response you think is going to be?
Yeah, well, just about 15 minutes ago, I was reading the latest news, and CNN was reporting that Donald Trump was telling reporters with reference to the U.S.-Israel relationship that, quote, I'm the one that calls the shots here. So everything that we've heard over the last few hours with respect to this escalation in the war in the Middle East suggests that Donald Trump is going to try and rein in the Israeli prime minister from responding to these Iranian attacks, which Iran is claiming is coming in response to Israeli bombing of Beirut, because the bigger prize for the American president is an exit from this war, is signing some sort of agreement with Iran that seems to be very close, and he doesn't want Benjamin Netanyahu and the war in Lebanon to scuttle and to prevent Donald Trump from taking this off-ramp from this disastrous war that he started on February the 28th.
So will Israel comply with President Trump's demand?
Well, that remains to be seen. Donald Trump seems to be talking very tough. We do have examples in the past where Donald Trump has imposed his will on Netanyahu, demanding that Netanyahu engage in a ceasefire and stop shooting. We saw this when Donald Trump was being inaugurated as president in his second term. He wanted a ceasefire in place in Gaza. He sent his Middle East envoy, Steve Witkoff, to Israel and basically told Netanyahu he's got to observe a ceasefire. And that's exactly what happened when it comes to the current so-called ceasefire in Gaza. Donald Trump came up with a 20-point plan and told Netanyahu, you better take it or else, the United States is walking away from Israel. So when Donald Trump, I think, wants to exert his will on Netanyahu, he has the ability to do so. There's a lot at stake here for him, right? He has to figure out a way of saving face after he started this war at the encouragement and based on the advice of Netanyahu, who was telling him this would be a very easy war. The Islamic Republic would quickly topple, and Donald Trump will be hailed as the person who finally solved the Iran problem. So I think there's a lot of bitterness there at some level. There has to be toward the advice that he was getting and received from Benjamin Netanyahu. And then, of course, the war didn't play out in the way that Donald Trump was hoping. So I think he is very much focused on the consequences of this war, rising, gas prices in the United States, inflation. There's U.S. midterms. This war is very unpopular in the United States. There's a lot of discontent within the Republican Party over this war, focusing on the U.S.-Israel relationship. So I don't think he's going to allow Benjamin Netanyahu to take the lead on relations with Iran, as Netanyahu was sort of doing until relatively recently.
I hear you on that, Professor, but it was only just last week that Trump was furious at Netanyahu, calling him crazy. And then we had Israel striking Beirut anyway, and now facing Iranian missiles. So I'm wondering just how much leverage does Trump actually have?
Oh, enormous amount of leverage. The United States is Israel's biggest backer, sustainer, supporter. If Donald Trump were to impose his will on Israel, Israel would have no choice but to comply. Of course, that would come as a cost because Donald Trump is very close to pro-Israel groups in the United States. They will accuse Donald Trump of abandoning Israel. But Donald Trump is also getting a lot of criticism from the base of his MAGA movement, particularly young people who listen to these popular podcasters who in recent months have been very critical of the U.S.-Israel relationship. I'm talking about people like Tucker Carlson, who have a huge amount of influence at the grassroots level. So Donald Trump, has to balance all of this together. And this war in Iran has proven to be a major foreign policy disaster for the president. Iran has ironically emerged much more stronger by virtue of its control over the Strait of Hormuz. And by virtue of the fact that it's now able to hit Israel, projecting sort of new confidence and power after 38 days of war where Iran was hit quite hard. So Donald Trump, I think, very much is thinking about himself, his own career, his own party, and he's less interested now in letting his relationship with Netanyahu drag him down any further than it already has.
Okay, so Professor, looking at Iran's thinking in all this, so what do you think Tehran's real objective was in attacking Israel? Was this about punishment? Is it about deterrence? Or does it actually want to raise the stakes here?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's several things. And one, Iran wants to protect its ally in Lebanon, Hezbollah, who's been hit really hard by the Israelis. There seemed to be an understanding about a week ago when Donald Trump said he spoke to Netanyahu and he allegedly spoke to Hezbollah. I think he was speaking to, Nabi Berri, the Speaker of the Parliament in Lebanon, who is very close to Hezbollah. And there seemed to be an understanding that Israel would not hit Beirut, and that that sort of agreement was in place until just yesterday, when Israel finally did hit Beirut, threatening Hezbollah, where its senior commanders are located. And Iran said, well, if that happens, we're going to respond and we're going to enter this war. The other thing that's happening here is, the question of the relations with the United States in this agreement, which hasn't been, signed yet. I think Iran does not benefit from this state of limbo where, we're very close to an agreement. Everyone says an agreement is imminent, but both sides have not signed on the dotted line. Let's not forget, Iran is feeling a lot of economic pain because of the war, critically because of the American blockade. Figures are that, 90% of Iran's trade is through the Persian Gulf. The American blockade is costing Iran about $500 million a day. And so Iran, I think, wants to shake up that equation too. It wants to send a message to the United States that this state of limbo is unsustainable. And so it's prepared to shake up the status quo in the Middle East, and to try and break this deadlock, knowing that the only way forward for the Islamic Republic is some sort of agreement with the United States that will allow for Iran to access its frozen bank accounts and then possibly get sanctions relief if there can be an agreement over Iran's nuclear program with the United States. So I think there's several things happening here that explains Iran's position.
Okay. All right, Professor, we have to leave it there. Thank you so much for talking to us this morning. Nader Hashemi is Associate Professor of Middle East and Islamic Politics at Georgetown University.